continue with our discussion with filter, and during that we'll talk about a few more calculated fields, and then we'll talk about all the other tabs as well, including the sort tab. Okay, so we already know how filter works, right? It's pretty simple. I would basically specify the field based on which I want to build my filter criteria. For example, in this case, I only wanted those workers who are not purged, right? So I selected, okay, is this criteria blank? So basically, I would specify the criteria on which I want to build my filter. So let's say my requirement is that I want to hire all workers whose date of birth, or let's say whose hire date is within a given date range. Now, as I mentioned, based on the field type you select, Workday automatically shows the relevant operators. So when I'm selecting hire date, which is a date field, or even if I select a numeric field, system will basically show me options. For example, greater than, less than, equal to, greater than, equal to, is blank, is not blank, and so on and so forth. However, if I search, let's say a numeric field, an instance field. So let's say I'm searching for position. Now position is an instance, right? So if you see position is an instance, it identifies a specific position. So now when I search for position, the operators that are available are different. So based on the field type that you select, Workday automatically shows you the relevant operators. Obviously for a position, greater than, less than doesn't make sense, right? Or for an instance, these values don't make sense. So Workday always shows you the relevant values based on the type of field that you have selected. Okay, so I basically want to build a filter saying I want to hire all or I want this report to pull all those workers who are hired, let's say in a certain date range, maybe from 1st of Jan 2022 till date, right? So that's my requirement. So now I'm going here. I want all workers whose hire date is, let's say, greater than or equal to 1st of Jan 2021, right? And I can leave it here, right? This would give me all workers hired whose hire date is either 1st of Jan 2021 or higher, including today's date. But then I'm still building my second filter, though this is not required based on my requirement. I would still select hire date. Oh, less than or equal to, right? And let's say December 31st, 2021. So I basically need all workers who were hired as of last year. And now, so I have selected the field based on which I want to build my filter. Based on the field type I selected, Workday automatically shows the relevant operator. And then we have the comparison type. So we have 4 different types of comparison types. So this is the basic comparison type. I'm basically saying check if the hire date or the value of hire date for a given worker, is it greater than or equal to the value that has been specified in this filter. And again, the filter would automatically show you the relevant options based on the field type you select, right? Because this is a field of type date. In comparison value, I have the option to specify a date. Had I selected a numeric, system would have shown me in comparison value an option to add a number. Had I selected position, uh, let me quickly show you that. So if I select, for example, management level, so based on the type of the field I select, system automatically shows me the relevant operator, right? But then it also shows me the relevant comparison value. So because I selected management level, now it is showing me all relevant management levels, right? So the first comparison type, it allows me to compare the value of this field against the value that is specified here. So the comparison type is called okay. So as I mentioned, we have 4 different comparison types, and the first one is value specified in this filter, which is pretty straightforward, right? I'm basically saying, okay, check if the hire date is equal to the or whatever operator I've specified, greater than or equal to the value specified in this filter. And this is pretty straightforward. I think we created this as a temporary report. So temporary reports, they come with a specific date and the reports get deleted after that date. There's a report which runs and that report automatically deletes all the reports. Okay, any which ways. So now when I run this report, it will basically give me all employees whose data has not been purged and who were hired last year, right? And there are some 752 employees. So what I want is all workers or all males hired in 2021, or if the person is a female, I'm just thinking of a random requirement, then get me them if they are hired in, let's say, 2010 till 2015. Okay. So this is my requirement. If the person gender is male, then they should have been hired in 2021. If they are female, then they should have been hired in 2015. Okay, so let's do a couple of things. First, we'll add gender so that can see whether the person on the report output. And now this is how I'll build my filter, right? So let's look at the requirement. I'll keep this person purged as is because else we have seen it gives us a lot of purged employees data, which we really cannot identify. Okay, so now this is the requirement. We have already built this filter saying that get those people who are hired in 2021, right? So this bit is already done. But then we should only get people hired in 2021 if they were male, right? So now I can add my additional filter either here or down, doesn't matter. So now I'm saying gender. Right? So I had deleted that management level filter. That's why it didn't get considered. But now I'm putting a, all right. Okay, now this takes care of my first requirement. So if the person is male, then system would check is their hire date greater than 2021 and less than December 21. So basically all males hired in 2021. Let me add another row. Now the second bit of the requirement is for females, their hire date should be 2010 to 15. So once again, I'll add gender. Okay. Again, in the selection list, this time I want female. And then what is the requirement with respect to hire date? If it is greater than or equal to, so from 2010, right? 2010. Once again, oh, there are some text fields as well. The reason I'm selecting this one because I can see these are all text fields. So probably someone would have created these calc fields. I know this is a date field, right? That's why I'm directly selecting that. Less than or equal to uh, December 31st, 2015. Oh, 2015. Okay, so we have put in all the filters that we want. But then if I directly use this, this wouldn't work. The reason is, if you see, these are mutually exclusive criterias. If a person is male, then we want only those people who are hired in 2021. For females, they could be hired in 2010 till 15. So now what I need to do is, because this is one requirement, I can now enclose them in parentheses. So I'll come here. This is my first condition, right? So now this is how the system reads. It will see, okay, is the person purged? Yes. Then it will check, okay, and is the person male? And is his hire date in this date range? But then if the person is a female, this is a second bit of requirement that we have. So I would enclose the second condition in parentheses. And now if you see, if a person is male, then they should be hired here, or if the person is female, they could be hired here. So now I would use instead of and, or. Now this is how system would read it. It would first check, is the person not purged, right? And is the person a male hired in this date range, or is the person a female hired in this date range? So we can use these parentheses brackets along with and or to build any condition we want. Okay, let's run this. Okay, so it pulls, there are 20 males, and if you look at their date of birth, let's sort it in ascending order, the hire date. Okay, so the first person is Jan 1st, 2021. And so basically it only pulls those work males who are in 2021. Let's see the females that were pulled in. Okay, now if you see, it is pulling those females who were hired in 2010, and so probably there's no other female hired in that date range, right? So it's getting me the right data. Now let's look at the filter once again. So everything in parentheses system. So we have, so this is exactly how uh, we used to have that, I think, Dombas formula in maths, right? Division, multiplication, brackets, division, multiplication, subtraction, addition, something we used to study, right, during our school days. That's exactly how system works. So it would consider everything in bracket as a single condition. So this is how system checks, is the person a male, and is the hire date greater than this, and is the hire date less than this. Now let's assume there's a male. Let me put it this way. So let's assume there's a male who is hired on 2022, right? Now system would check the first criteria. So the person is not purged. So system returns true for the first condition. So I have true, which is basically purged is not blank. So this person is not purged. System returns true. Then it evaluates the parenthesis. So here we have an AND condition. System checks, is this person a male? And he's a male. So system returns true. System checks, is the hire date greater than 2021, which is again true. If you see, his hire date is greater than 2021, and everywhere in between we have AND condition, right? So within this condition and this condition, I'll just put it here. We have and, and. Now what is the third condition? So his hire date is greater than 2021, but his hire date is not less than 2021. So here system returns false. Now we know what happens. True and true is true. So true and true returns true. True and false returns false. False or false returns false. False and true returns true. Right? So this is how system, and this is basic maths, right? Okay, so now if you see, true and true returns true, but true and false returns false. So here we have three ands within this bracket, and the first condition is true, true and false. So this overall criteria becomes false. So this person will not be picked because the overall criteria is false. Now it evaluates the next condition, which is an or. Obviously, this person is not a female, right? So the very first criteria becomes false. So now it evaluates this bit wherein the gender is not female. So this becomes false, and the other two might be true. It doesn't matter, right? Because one is false, this overall bracket becomes false. Now system would, because it's all false, I should have actually included it in one more parenthesis. Right? So overall, right from here till here, I put it in one more parenthesis. Now this is what system does. So we have false or false, which is false, right? So this overall condition becomes false. This is still true, but then true and false will again return false, right? So it's very simple. If we remember this, then this is what system does, right? So it will evaluate everything within each of these brackets. So first it evaluates this condition within the first parenthesis. Does it evaluates this condition within the second parenthesis? So it could be true or false. So let's say there's a person, a male hired in 2021, then the first criteria becomes true. The second criteria is or. The second one would obviously be false because the person is not a female, but then true or false is still true, right? And then true and true is again true. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So again, so we can with the help of this and or and these brackets, we can handle any requirement in terms of building a filter, right? All we need to do is understand what they're asking for and then use these or and parentheses. Okay, so that was the first comparison type, which is basically value specified in this filter. Okay, now there's another comparison type as well, which is value from another field. I'm removing all of this. Okay, so instead of using value specified in this filter, I could have also said, if I go in here under comparison type and click on common, if you see there is another option called value from another field. Now what it does is the moment I select value from another field, if you see my comparison value, it's no longer an option to enter a date. So basically what I'm saying is compare this field with another field of the same type. So for example, I want all employees, let's say hired, uh, whose hire date, how can I, is, uh, let's say, okay, that's fine. When I come in here, if you see, it gives me now a number of options. So what I can basically do is I can compare hire date with a value in another date field. If you see, it's only returning me fields of type date. Right? So it basically allows me to compare this date field with another date field, or this numeric field with another numeric field, or this instance with another instance, right? I think we had built a date, right? Let's search for. So we had built, where is our build date? Build date. So this is a field of type date, right? We had created a calculated field. Now I can come to filter and I can add this, right? So basically what I'm saying is get me all those workers whose hire date is greater than or equal to the value that is defined in this date field, right? So value from another field allows me to compare two different fields of the same type. Now this will obviously not return me any data because this build date we had selected year as 2099. So obviously there's no worker whose hire date is greater than 2099. So system would basically check for each worker, it would compare their hire date against this field, this date value, right? Okay, so that is the second comparison type wherein I can compare one field with another field of the same type.
Sir, can you please show this calculated field that you had created? I just wanted to
So we
see.
created this last week. You remember? We had
Yes,
built
yes, yes.
a date wherein we
Yes,
had said, okay, the year is 2099. We had said extract month from the date of birth, extract day from the hire date,
yes.
right? So,
Got
so the reason I'm able to select is because this is a date field. And when I go to all, if you see, it's only showing me fields of type date. Instead, let me add another. So when I go to all, if you see, it's only showing me fields of type date, because I cannot compare a date field with any other field type. Instead, if I, let's say, take age, now I know age is a numeric field. So if we take age, which is basically this hash symbol, and let's say I go in here, let's say greater than, and I select. So when I say value specified in this filter, if you see, I can add a number, right? However, when I say value from another field, now this changes. And when I go to all, now I can compare it with any age or any numeric. It also shows me currency fields. We know currency fields are ultimately numbers, right? With an additional currency value, right? So that is the second comparison type, which is value from another field. Now there's a third comparison type as well. Now we see this, if I specify a hire date here, it gives me some flexibility, in the sense now it allows me to pull data for a certain date range. But then as an end user, I still do not have the complete flexibility, in the sense, as an end user, when I run this report, it will always pull me data based on the filters that have been predefined. So these are static filters. End users, they would obviously not have an option to edit the report and change these values. So we want to give end users the option to enter a value, and then this report should pull data based on the value that they enter. So for that, we have another comparison type, which is prompt the user for value. So the moment I specify this comparison type, the end user would be prompted, right? They can enter any date. System would now compare the hire date against the date that the end user entered. So when I click OK and run this time, if you see, I'm prompted to enter a date. So now if I select 1st of Jan 2022, it will only pull me those workers whose hire date is greater than 2022. Right? So it's pulling some 705 odd workers. If I sort it in ascending order, right? So the first worker that it gets me is the one hired on 1st of Jan 2022. So basically I said, get me all those workers whose hire date is greater than or equal to the value that is entered by the end user in the prompt when he's running this report. So the option is prompt the user for value. So we have value specified in this filter, value from another field, and then prompt the user for value. Okay, but then
So when we are using value from another field,
mhm,
um, let's say in the field, like in the field column, we
mhm,
are using a calculated field.
mhm.
Uh, so would it still like show me the calculated field, and then whatever calculated field I'm using here?
It
So let's
would.
say instead
Mhm,
of hire date on the filter tab,
mhm,
so
mhm,
instead of hire date, I am using a calculated field here
mhm,
in the field type.
mhm,
So let's say I'm using some like ESI or any other
mhm,
calculated field. Would it
mhm.
still return the same type in the comparison value?
Exactly, yeah. So for example, we had created this instance, right? Company subtype. Let me take this calculated field and add it to the filter, right? So now this is an instance, right? We know that. So I can see the symbol. So now if I go in here in the selection list, so when you say value specified in this filter, it will show you all subtypes. If you say value from another field, again, now it will show you only instance fields.
So what do you mean by instance fields, like LRV fields?
We discussed what is an instance, right, last time.
Oh, okay,
So,
okay. Got it.
so instance is, for example, a company is an instance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uh, Worker is an instance, a position is an instance, and so on and so forth. So these rules that we discussed, even if you are building a calculated field, if you built a calculated field of type date, it behaves like a workday delivered date field. If you build a calculated field of type numeric, you can it behaves like a workday delivered numeric field. So everything that we can do with a numeric field, workday delivered, we can do the same thing with a calculated field of type numeric that you have built. So it behaves in exactly the same manner, right? It doesn't matter whether it is a calculated field you have created or it's a workday delivered field. It doesn't make a difference, right? Okay, I'm adding my second hire date as well. And here I'm again selecting less than or equal to, right? I'm selecting prompt the user for value. Now if you see, the moment I select prompt the user for value, in comparison value, it's automatically adds something called default prompt. Earlier when we had a single hire date, we had prompted it to the user. The end user had the option to enter hire date, right? Now whenever you're prompting the same field more than once. So here if you see, I'm prompting hire date more than once, right? Here as well as here. You just have to ensure that the comparison value that you select is not unique. So here you have said hire date greater than or equal to, and workday automatically adds default prompt again. So when you do that, system Workday would not be able to identify, and it will only show this prompt once. So what I mean is, even though you're prompting hire date twice to the user so that he can enter a date range, when I click OK and when I run it, if you see, system still shows hire date once. And the reason for that is, in comparison value, we have selected the same default options. Now, as I mentioned, this is only required when you're prompting the same field more than once. So this is what you'll have to do. If you come here, there are a number of other options. You can select any one of these other options. It doesn't matter as long as I mentioned, the comparison values are not unique, right? So here I've changed it. I've changed it to starting prompt. Here I've left it as default prompt. And now when I click OK and run it, if you see, now it shows me the prompt twice, right? This is only required once again when you are prompting the same field more than once. So if I prompt another field, let me edit this report. So let's say I want to prompt gender in the selection list, and I'm saying prompt the user for value. Now I can leave it as default prompt. It doesn't matter because these are two different fields, right? Okay, just for the sake of uniformity, I'm selecting ending prompt here. As I mentioned, it doesn't matter what values you select from this list. These are all Workday delivered list. Okay. And the reason Workday gives you these options is because if you have selected many prompts, you have different values available. So, right? Okay. So now when I come in here, click OK and run it. I have gender, starting hire date, ending hire date. All are prompted, right? So I'm selecting male here. And for hire date, I am selecting 1st of Jan 2010. And here, let's say December 31st, 2014. Oh,
Will this give a value? It won't.
it wouldn't
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
it should be okay. And now it would give me all males hired. So it's only giving me males and it's only giving me those values hired in 2010 till 2014, right? Okay, let's see what happens when I run this with a blank value. Let's say I don't specify gender, or maybe I leave this blank. If you see, it doesn't give me any value, right? Even though none of these prompts are required, but still, when I don't specify a value, it doesn't give me any output, right? Now, looking at the logic, you may think there are still employees whose hire date is greater than 2010. So it should still return me some values, right? Okay. Now, what happens is, let me edit this in a different tab and also run it. So here I'm selecting male. I'm not specifying. So no matter what combination I select or do not select, when I leave anything blank, it doesn't give me any output, right? Okay, so I'll leave it as is. I have also opened another tab. If I go to filter and if I come here, prompt the user for value. If I go to all, you will see there is another option, which again says prompt the user for value. I'm selecting that. Once again, here I need to make sure that for hire date, they are not unique. So I'll just select starting and ending. Now let's run this report. So once again, like earlier, I'll just specify the gender and leave the hire date blank. Now this time, if you see it's given me 79 rows, when I come in here, it's only giving me males, right? Now what is the difference between the earlier version of our report and this version? Here, when I specify gender or even if I leave gender blank, right? It would, right? This time when I leave gender blank, it's basically giving me all data, male, female, as well as those who do not have a gender at all. So what is the difference? The difference is between the comparison types that we selected. So earlier we had selected the comparison type, prompt the user for value. This time I have selected the comparison type, prompt the user for value, and ignore the filter condition if the value is blank. So basically what happens is system would still prompt the end user for value, which is basically this bit. However, if the value is blank, in the sense end user doesn't specify any value, then system simply ignores the filter condition. So it behaves as if this filter criteria doesn't exist, right? So if I don't specify any gender, then system will simply pull me data irrespective of the gender value. So it behaves as if this filter criteria doesn't exist at all. If I don't enter the hire date, starting hire date, or the ending hire date, once again, it behaves as if these criteria do not exist at all. So if I'm saying prompt the user for value, it in theory, I'm making that prompt a required prompt, because if I don't enter any value, system wouldn't get me any data, right? So we have prompt the user for value, and then this another prompt which says prompt the user for value and ignore the filter if the value is blank. So these are the 4 comparison types we can use. Okay, what I can also do is I can manage my prompts. So if I come to edit, once again, I want to change my prompt criteria to prompt the user for value, because I want people to enter, let's say, the hire date. So I'm changing the hire date criteria, let's say, but then I want to leave the gender as is. So it doesn't matter if people do not enter a gender, system would pull everything. Right now, in the sense, now I have made hire dates or these dates required, because end user wouldn't understand what is happening when they leave it blank. System, they will see, okay, still runs, but it doesn't give them any output. So I want a way to show the end user that these are required fields. Now if I come to prompts tab, this is where I can manage my prompts. So I have this checkbox, populate undefined prompt defaults. When I select this, right, everything gets added here. So these are the prompts based on the filter that I have defined, right? So though my filter has 4 different conditions, this condition we are not prompting. So it doesn't show up, everything else shows up. Now I can say, okay, these 2 hire dates are actually required, because if users don't enter anything, we know that system any which ways will return blank value. So this time when I go in here and run, now these are both required, which means I'll get an error, right? There are other options as well for managing my prompts. So come here and come to prompts. So I don't want an end user to continuously enter values, right? For hire date and for these 2 hire dates. I want to specify some default values. So I can come in here. Currently no default value has been, uh, okay. So instead I can come in here, and instead of saying no default value, I can say specify default value. And here, for example, I can say 1st of Jan 2021 or anything that I want, right? Here I am, let's say, selecting today's date. So the option is the default option was no default value. But then if I want, I can also specify default value. I can also reorder. So I want gender to be at the bottom. I can reorder my prompts. So I've moved gender to the bottom, right? So now when the end user runs this report, they would have these hire dates defaulted, right? They are defaulted, but as an end user, I can still change them based on what I need, right? But then every time this report is run, these values would be defaulted based on whatever was entered. Okay, so what did I say or what did I select? Specify default value. Sorry, right? So instead of no default value, I've selected specify default value. Now, if you see, when I'm running this report today, this works fine for me. Uh, Today is April 2nd, 2022. But when someone runs this report tomorrow or day after tomorrow or a year from now, the ending prompt would always show as 4 to 2022, right? Because that's what has been defaulted here. Now, I don't want that to happen. What I basically want is if am running a report on a given day, the ending prompt or this date should automatically default to that particular date because that's what makes sense. So now what I can do is I can edit it. Now there's a third comparison option as well. So if I come to prompts, instead of specify default value, if you see determine default value at runtime. Now this option is similar to this option that we have discussed, value from another field. Now this is where it would make sense. What I'm saying is hire date should be equal to the value of the field that I specify here. And I'm saying today, right? Now today is a workday delivered field. It is once again a date field and it always returns today's date. So no matter when this report is being executed, it will always returns today's date or whenever the date on which this report runs. Now we see my report is now much more dynamic. I have not specified a default value. So when I'm running this report now, I've selected today and today is April 2nd. It automatically defaults to April 2nd, right? So this is exactly what this also does, right? So if I say hire date greater than or equal to value from another field and today, then system would automatically check, okay, is anyone's hire date greater than today's date, right? Okay, now, so my ending hire date is all set, but then I want something similar for my starting hire date as well. So let's say anytime a person runs this report, I want the ending hire date to be that date. So let's say 30th of April 2022 if I'm running on 30th of April. But the starting hire date currently is it's always defaulting to 1st of Jan 2021, right? Because that's what I have specified. I've specified it to be 1st of Jan 2021. Instead, I want this to be 6 months in the past. So when I'm running it on 30th of April, I want the starting date to be 1st of November 2021 or whatever is 6 months in the past or maybe 1 month in the past. So I want this date to be 1st of Jan 2022. Now I can do that as well. So once again, this is where I want the date to be dynamically calculated. I'm saying determine default value at runtime. Now here I can build a calculated field. Now this is the calculated field we saw uh, last week as well, and it is called increment or decrement date. So what it does is it allows me to add a specific number or subtract a specific number from a date. So what I want is I want the starting date to be 1 month in the past from today's date. So now I can take today and subtract 30 days from it. I think there are some calculated fields already built. We'll have a look at that and then, okay. Okay, so people have already created some calculated fields. Uh, okay, no one has created anything, so let us create one. I'll come in here. I'll create a calculated field for the report, right? The field type that I'll create is, as I mentioned, increment and decrement or decrement date. I would build it on global because I know this would be used in other reports as well. And I'm saying today minus 6 months. So now I can go in here. So as I mentioned, this allows me to increment, add or subtract a certain number of years or months or days from another date field, right? So I'm taking today's date here, right? And from that, I want to subtract 6 months. So the second column is months. So if I take a positive number, it adds. If I take a negative number, it subtracts. So now this is what system would do. It will take this date field, whatever is specified here, in this case today, and it would subtract 6 months from it, right? Or I could have subtracted a number of days. So instead of 6 months, for example, I could have added 30 days or subtracted 30 days or anything else I could have done. I'm selecting return 0 on error. So I've created a new calculated field of type increment or decrement date, and I'm calling it today minus 6 months. And now let's run it.
So the end user would not be able to change the default value?
They can always change, right?
Okay.
But what is shown to them is determined dynamically, right? That's the advantage. It's not like no matter when they run this report, maybe 10 years down the line, they are still shown April 2nd, 2022. That doesn't happen. So now if you see, the ending hire date is today, and today is April 2nd, and this is today minus 6 months, which is October 2nd, 2021. Right? Now as an end user, I always have the ability to change it. Right? I can still select whatever I want. But the difference is now system is dynamically calculating this. Right? Okay, I could have used this directly in my filter by saying value from another field. So I could have gone in here. Now this is where that value from another field comes in handy. So instead of doing this, I could have gone into filter and said hire date greater than or equal to value from another field and said, okay, today minus 6 months, right? And hire date less than or equal to today, right? So now when I run this report, system would always give me those workers whose hire date is less than or equal to today and greater than or equal to today minus 6 months. Now the only difference is here, because this is a static prompt, static filter I've built, the end user doesn't have that option. So now he cannot change anything. And the reason is I'll basically have to remove those prompts because I'm no longer prompting hire date. I'll have to remove them from here. So now when I run it, I'll only be prompted for gender because that's the only thing I'm still prompting to the end user. When I run it, it will only get me those workers who are hired in the last, let's sort it in ascending order. Hired since 10 to 2021. All right. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, at any point in time, and this is something we discussed I in our very first session, I can always select a change the data source. So the current data source type, if you see this icon, it identifies that this is a standard data source. Instead of this, I can select a indexed data source as well, right? I'm selecting an or any other data source. So at any point in time, I can change the data source, but then I can only select data source from the primary business object. So basically change the data source. Now I'm not making any other change on this report. Let's run this. So when I run it now, if you see, in addition to gender, a few additional prompts are automatically displayed. In fact, one of this prompt is a required prompt. So if I run it, system gives me an error. So where are these prompts coming from? These prompts are coming directly from the data source. So some data sources, they come with inbuilt prompts or built-in prompts. So if you go to the data source description, it will tell you that this data source once again comes with these three built-in prompts, right? Because these are built-in prompts, I cannot delete them. I cannot change them. The only option that I have is I can manage them. So once again, if I go to prompts tab and once again click on this checkbox, populate undefined prompt defaults, it shows me all those prompts, right? As I mentioned, I don't have an option. This is a required prompt. I cannot make it optional because this is required from the data source itself, right? So I cannot make it optional. However, I have a few options. So once again, I can specify any default value. For example, organization, I want to default organization as, so based on the field type system as we already know this, right? Because this is organization, system is showing me relevant organizations. And I'm selecting global modern services, right? Uh, Here I want to once again specify default value because in my output, I want to include managers. I want to specify default value, all subordinates. As I mentioned, end user would any which ways have an option to change it if he wants to. What I can also do is I can hide some of these prompts. I don't want this prompt include managers to be displayed. I can hide it. So do not prompt at runtime basically hides that prompt. But then it doesn't mean that prompt is still not in action. So for example, if I hide this prompt, system would still only pull those workers who are part of this organization that I have selected. The only difference is this prompt will no longer be displayed to the end user, but report will still fetch me data based on whatever value I have selected, right? Okay, so if I don't want, I can hide these prompts. I can even hide the prompt for gender if I don't want to, right? Okay, now there's one difference between required prompt and optional prompt. So because this prompt is optional, even gender is optional, I can hide it without specifying any value because it's an optional prompt. But if you see, if currently I'm able to hide this organization's prompt, and we know that this is a required prompt. Let me go in here and say no default value. And let's save this. Now, system is giving me an error. And the reason is, if you see, this is a required prompt, right? Which means a value is required for this prompt. I am hiding it, right? Which means the end user will no longer have an option to enter the value because I'm going to hide it from the end user. And that's why system is giving me an error. It's basically saying you are hiding a required prompt, but you have not entered a default value. So if you want to hide a required prompt, you'll have to specify a default value for it, right? Because else system wouldn't work, the report wouldn't work. So now when I go in here and select anything, my error disappears. Now that's not the case for optional prompts, right? Because these are optional. I can simply hide them even without specifying any value. So now when I go in here, system doesn't give me any error, right? So I would, all these prompts are hidden. I'll only see this option now. So when I click on run, if you see, it only shows me this option. Though when I run it, it will still fetch me data only for global modern services for those employees hired in the last 6 months. So now it's only getting me 14 records, right? Now, whatever options I select, if you see, uh, those options are displayed here. If I go back and edit, I'm unchecking this, I'm unchecking this. Once again, when I run it, and any options that I select, right, it shows me with what options this report has executed, right? However, that last column that we have seen, if I check that column, then system wouldn't show me these options. If I go back to the prompts tab and basically select this option, do not include in subtitle, then system would not show me this in the report output. Or if I want to hide everything, I can simply uncheck this box, right? And then nothing would display in the subtitle. So it basically says display prompt values in subtitle. It was checked by default and I'm unchecking this. So when I do that, nothing gets displayed. Or if I selectively do not want a specific value to be displayed, so I don't want this value to be displayed, right? Right? So now if you see, it's only showing me gender, include subordinate. It doesn't show me what organization was selected and this report was run with, right? Okay, so that's what do not display in subtitle means. Again, as I mentioned, if we wanted, we could have hidden everything. So if we uncheck this box, nothing gets displayed.
Also in organization, we can select multiple organizations, right?
Yeah, yeah, we
These
can.
things
We
are
can.
allowed. Mm.
We can. Okay, so we'll talk about. Uh, so in addition to filter, if you want, you can also define sub filter as well. So sub filters. Okay.
So
So
on the filter tab, uh, on the filter tab, I also see aggregations. So what is that? I never use that.
I have not used that as well. Uh, I can check that and confirm that to you. I have personally never used this.
I think this is on if we have used some like some count or maximum
Yeah,
values in our report, we can aggregate use filter on those values.
yeah. But for sure, I can have a look and we can discuss this tomorrow. If I'm not able to find anything by tomorrow, we'll certainly close this bit in the next week. I've personally never used it in any of my reports. Okay, but any which
Okay.
ways, we can discuss
And
tomorrow.
I have one more question regarding prompts. So, in our company, the department is a custom organization. It's not, we are not using a Workday delivered department.
Hmm.
So, if I want to add that department as a prompt,
We
I'm
can
adding
still
a
do that.
calculated field in the prompt.
Yes.
So, when I'm adding a field which is calculated field and adding it as a prompt,
Hmm.
they somehow can also see company and cost center and a cost center
Right.
hierarchy. So how
Right.
do I hide all those things and
Okay.
just make sure that department is visible because the field is calculated field.
Right. So the limitation is, if you see, you would have built it on organizations field. So the limitation with organizations field is it basically shows you all organization type. Now the problem with a custom field or a custom organization type is it's not a workday delivered option, right? So there's no specific field available only for that organization type. So if you see, it's showing me all custom organization types. Someone has created AGM club and weekday batch and weekend and so on and so forth. So the reason we build all our calculated fields with respect to custom organizations on organization type field, there's
Hmm.
no option. It would always show all organization types. It will show cost centers, companies, and so on
Hmm.
and so forth. So that's
Yeah.
a limitation. Only for supervisory, Workday has given us, so supervisory company cost centers. Workday does give us specific fields, but then here, if you see, I'm selecting supervisory org as well, right? And I could have selected company as well. I could have selected cost center as well. For that, Workday still gives us specific fields. So I still
Right.
have the option. But then for custom organization, there's no option. It always
Yeah.
shows everything.
Hmm. Because where you have organization in the second second field, I have added that custom organization calculated field, and so when they run the report, they can see filter by company, department, and
And
cost center. So when if they select the department, the report output runs properly. But if they
right,
select company or cost center, then
exactly.
it
It the
runs
same,
blank data.
right? So in my project as well, and they are very big on reporting. They build, we continuously keep building reports, right? We have something called reporting entity, and reporting entity is exactly similar as company. I don't know what is the logic why they have two different things. So
Hmm.
someone selects company, so there's always two objects with the same name, one is company, one is reporting entity. So we have the same issue, but there's no option because there's no specific field available for our custom organization types. So
Right.
there's no option.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that.
Okay, Perfect. The advantage of sub-filter is if you want to build a filter on related business objects. So if you see, let's say I'm selecting, what should I select? Uh, let's say I'm selecting, mm, uh, 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 okay, let's see if I can pull. Uh, okay, let's take our company example. So I'm taking company, right? And from company, I'm able to, now when I go to all, it is showing me all the fields which are available on the company business object, which in this case is an RPO, right? So now when I search for age, it doesn't show me because it's not getting me data from worker now. It's getting me data from company, which is a related business object of my primary business object for this report, which is worker. So it no longer shows me that age field, right? It doesn't show me hire date field. It wouldn't show me date of birth because now I'm pulling data from company. Okay, so I can go here and get any of the attributes of company. So let's see what I can add. Okay, so when we create companies, we specify currency for that company, the default currency for the company. I also have the option to specify subtype. Okay, again, both these fields are available on the company object, or company is a subtype of organization, right? So these are not coming from worker. These are coming from organization or company, which is basically the related business object. Now let's say I want to only pull in those workers on my report who's who belong to a company with the default currency of US dollars. So once again, I only want to pull those workers if they belong to a company, let's say ABC, whose default currency is US dollar, right? Which means I need to build a filter on this currency field, which is basically the one on the company, the default currency for the company. Now the problem is I cannot pull this field directly on my filter. So when I go to filter and try adding this field and search for currency, it's showing me various currency options. Does it show me anything? It doesn't get me that currency field, right? Let's keep scrolling down. No. So we cannot directly pull any fields from the related business object onto our filter. So for that, we have two options. Either we create an LRV or we can add them directly on the subfilter. So now I can go to my subfilter, click on add. So I want to build. So what is my requirement? Once again, pull those workers who belong to a company with default currency of US dollars, right? So I can once again go to my sub filter, click on add. I'll have to specify the related business object based on which I'm building this filter. So I'm building this filter on the company business object. I'll select company, and from here I can now add currency. Now when I search for currency, if you see, this is the default currency of the worker. So now I can say currency in the selection list, and here I can select my currency. So I'm selecting US dollars. Now when I'm doing that, I'll have to go back to my filter, and in my filter, I'll have to go back to my filter, and in my filter, I'll have to specify the business object on which I have created my subfilter. So the business object on which I have created my subfilter is company. I'll have to specify company is not blank. So this is how Workday works. It will, when you run this report, it will first come to subfilter. It will evaluate that subfilter. So it will basically pull those workers whose company currency is US dollars. Then it will come in here, come to filter, and then evaluate all the other criteria for the filter as well. So if you don't specify company is not empty, then your subfilter doesn't work. So whenever you using any subfilter, you can build a subfilter using multiple related business objects as well. So I could have come in here and added another business object, and so on and so forth. Now I want those workers whose company currency is US dollars and whose subtype is ABC. Once again, if you remember, on the company RBO, we have also added, oh, is it gone? Okay, that's fine. So the company subtype, I can add, this works exactly the same way as we create our filters. So there are two options once again. So either I add it to the sub filter, or if I don't want to build a sub filter, then I'll have to create an LRV. So if you remember, for company subtype, we had created an LRV, and this is the advantage. So the advantage of LRV is, similarly, I can build an LRV for currency as well, right? So instead of specifying currency on the sub filter, I can create an LRV, and the advantage of LRV is I can directly use my LRV on the filter itself. So now I don't have to specify subtype on the subfilter. So this is the advantage of lookup related value, because basically what I've done is, if I can refresh what we discussed last time, so we have basically pulled subtype from the company directly onto the worker. So that's what lookup related value does, right? So this is basically what I'm doing. I'm pulling subtype from the company business object and bringing it directly on the worker business object, because now the company subtype is pulled onto worker. I can directly use it in the filter, right? So either I can say, similarly, I could have created an LRV for currency as well. So let me edit it directly here. I could have
So if
created,
we use LRV, we do not need to create a subfilter
exactly,
because we are
right?
directly taking a field from related to.
Exactly. So instead of, let's say I'm pulling this building, if you see, this is the same currency field that we have used in subfilter, the default currency of the worker. I would rename it and call it currency. Now, because I have created an LRV and pulled the currency from company directly onto worker, now I can directly add, if you see, I can go in here and say in the selection list, and once again, search for US dollar or any other currency. So this filter that I have built, it's exactly the same as this filter I have built. The only difference is on the filter, you can only select those fields which are available on your primary business object. So because currency is not available on your primary business object, it's available on your related business object. We selected that related business objects and then use the fields of that related business object to build that filter. Instead of that, the easy thing, what I did is I directly pulled that field onto my primary business object itself. And now because I've pulled that field, now I can use it directly in my filter. So both of these are exactly same. So now I don't need this anymore, right? Because now I don't have my, and when I run it, it will only give me those people with, right? If you see, I've directly changed this field, right? That's why it shows US dollars, though the name. It's only giving me those workers who are hired in a company whose currency is US dollar, and it doesn't give me anything. And obviously GMS USA has the default. So if I go to this company, you can see the default currency specified there as US dollars, right? So that is the advantage of lookup related value.
So, what is it like preferred if do we use sub filters if we use related business object or LRV?
Okay, so I
I
pers-
always use sub filters.
sub filter. In terms of report performance, sub filters are
Are
better,
better. Right, right,
right?
right. The lesser
Because
use of calculated fields.
exactly.
Right.
So
So, can you please explain me, sir, sorry, that why you used company not empty? Like, how would it the total
so
like
once again,
how
so
is the
this is how
subfilter working? Mhm.
whenever you build a sub filter, you'll have to specify that. That's how Workday report works. So you basically will have to take the business object on which you have built your filter or sub filter. So for example, let's say I built my sub filter on two business objects. I'm selecting, let's say, organization as one of the business object on which I'm pulling my sub filter. Uh, uh, let's say this one.
Sorry.
And now let's see if I can select supervisory org, or let me take company. If I can take company here. Not sure. Let's see what company hierarchy global modern services belong to. So I'm basically saying only bring me those workers who belong to a company which is part of any one of these hierarchies. So this is one of my filter. And again, I'm just adding random filters, right? And I'm saying, let's say job profile, right? Again, I could have added management level directly there. I'm just taking this as an example. Okay, so I have added two subfilters, right? One is on the business object called organization assignments, and then another one is on job profile. So whenever, once again, I create subfilters, this is what I'll have to do. I'll have to go to the filter type or the filter tab, right? I'll have to specify each of those related business objects and say, let me first run it this way, and then I'll show you what happens if we don't specify this. So because we added two sub filters, one on job profile and the other one on org assignments, I'll remove everything else. I'm removing this. I'm also removing my hire date. We don't need it anymore. I'll have to go to prompts. And I'm selecting an indexed.
Before creating subfilters, have you added those in columns as well? Like you have to add, right? Or
No, not required. See,
oh, okay,
it,
okay, okay,
what you add in columns, it will show in columns. It has no link to uh, the subfilter and vice versa.
okay,
Okay.
okay, okay.
Even
I
for
thought we
filter,
need to use those fields first in columns and then create a subfilter on them. Not like
no,
that.
it doesn't matter. It
Okay.
doesn't matter. Right. So with filters or subfilters, it doesn't matter. Okay. So this is what I've done. And let's run this report. So I've removed all prompts. These prompts are coming directly from the new data source that I've selected. Some prompts also come from the field. So this prompt is coming from,
This company hierarchy is also a built-in prompt from this data source.
yeah. So some prompts come from the data source, some prompts come from the field. Now this particular prompt is coming from the field that I have added. So some fields come with built-in prompts. Again, this is how these are all Workday delivered fields. So if you add that field, it will automatically add the relevant prompt. So if you see now, it is giving me all workers who belong to this hierarchy and who are managers. So if I go ahead and edit this report and add management level as well, that will give me that idea, right? Because without this, so the only reason I also add the column is so that we can validate the data. Else we wouldn't know. So now we are not sure whether these people are managers or not, right? I'm adding that management level as well, just to confirm that our output is correct. I'm selecting, where is management level? So we can also use search prefix directly here. So now when I run this, I should have selected that include terminated workers as well. If you see, it's only giving me managers. So I know that my sub filters, they are working fine, right? What was our sub filter? Our sub filter was only include workers for specific organization type who belong to a management level manager. However, if I go ahead and edit my report and remove those two options from filter, or even if I remove one option that from that filter. So let's say I come in here and remove job profile. Right now we already know that job profile is added. It's the second business object on which I built my sub filter. I'm again selecting the exact same prompt input. However, this time, if you see, it's only working for GMS. I'm not sure, but then now it gives me all management levels. So this is how the logic works. Anytime we add a subfilter, we'll have to specify the business object on which that subfilter has been built onto our filter tab as well and say is not blank, right? If we don't do that, then our report subfilter basically wouldn't work. So we'll have to come in here and say is not blank or is not empty. If we don't do that, the subfilter, it doesn't work. Because this is what links our subfilter. As I mentioned, Workday first evaluates the results based on our subfilter, right? And then when we specify, okay, job profile is not empty, it will then take those results which are which it has evaluated based on that subfilter, and then on top of that results, it then evaluates the filter conditions. However, if we don't specify this subfilter object, then Workday simply starts from the scratch. So once it has evaluated the results based on job profile and organization assignments, if there's no link which connects subfilter with filter, then Workday again reevaluates the filter and only gives you results based on the filter. So you'll always have to specify is not empty.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay, now let's look at a
And
few.
the sub filter is always and condition, right? Not or.
Yeah, it's always and. Within subfilter, if for example, if you specify more options, I could have said management level is this or whatever. So within each subfilter, I can specify once again whatever conditions I want. I can say and or brackets everything.
But
But
you
here,
can't say the company hierarchy is and the job profile is
no,
for, right?
that is yes, exactly. So within different business objects, it's always and, right? Within a given business object, there you can build whatever condition you want. But
Hmm.
when you're specifying more than one business object, it's and.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now let's look at a few other instance related calculated fields. So let's go back and I'll add a few more. Okay, uh, I'll remove these subfilters. We don't need them. Okay, I'll come back to columns and let's add a position. When it comes to position, you'll see there are this single instance field. And when I go here, it is basically the worker's primary position. So in Workday, we have a concept of additional jobs. So this is a single instance field. Once again, let me search for position. Let's first run this report and then we'll talk about it. If I scroll down, you'll find there are other position fields as well. And those are also Workday delivered. Uh, okay, if you see this multi-instance field, and when I go here, it basically says contains all positions for the worker, primary as well as additional. So I've added these two fields. What I'll also do is I'll go to my filter and add one more condition saying additional job is not empty. So the advantage is it will only give us those values we are looking at. It will not give us all that extra junk. Let's first run this report and then we'll have a discussion. All right, now when I run this report, it's giving me 3 workers. When I go in here, if you see for each of these workers, it is showing me something in the position field. It's giving me one option, but here it's giving me more than one option. If I go to these worker profiles, you'll find this identifier. Now this identifier basically means that this worker is doing more than one job, right? Now this IA identifies that this worker is on an international assignment. So if you see here, this worker has some position, Vice President Sales, right? And if I click it, So this person is Vice President Sales, reporting to Mandeep, who is his manager based out of Chicago in Global Modern Services. But then he has gone on an international assignment. And again reporting to Mandeep. Again, don't worry, this is all test systems, so people have created all sorts of junk. But any which ways, the idea behind an additional job is in addition to my primary role, I could also be working in an additional position, right? I could have gone on an international assignment. Even if I've not gone on an international assignment, probably I'm working on secondment, right? On a different project in the same company, in the same country. So I could be working on more than one positions as well. So while this is a single instance field, this is a multi-instance field, right? Now I have a requirement. So here I know that this is the primary position for these workers. Now I want to get, let's say, only the international assignment positions for the worker. So if you see, there's a separate workday delivered field which gets me the primary position, but then there's no field which allows me to separately identify international assignees. So then there's this multi-instance field which basically shows all positions of the worker. Now this is what I want. From this multi-instance field, I only want to pull those positions which are related to workers' international assignments. Let me quickly edit. I'm sure there are a few other workers as well. Now, if someone has actually purged this entire system, let me from filter remove persons purged. And now let's run this report. Okay, there's still three workers. All right, so now what I want is I want to create a single instance, right, out of this multi-instance field. So for that, I can create a calculated field called extract single instance. So I'm creating a calc field of type extract single instance. And the reason I'm creating this calc field is because I can see that for each worker, he is on a single international assignment position. So out of all the instances of positions he's on, I only want that instance of the position which is related to his or her international assignment. So I'm creating an extract single instance calculated field. I'm creating it on worker. CF SI worker IA position, right? So what is my source field? Basically, this is my source field, right? Because out of all positions and jobs, I want the international assignment positions and jobs. So my source field is all positions and jobs. Let's see what is the other field. Uh, all of the workers primary and additional positions you can only use on a custom data source. Okay. All right. Once again, when I click here, if you see this field, it links worker business object with the position business object. So this field is not directly available on the worker. Instead, it is coming through the related business object. So the moment I select this field, system automatically defaults the position for me, right? Because it's coming through this RBO, right? Now I need to build a condition, right? On based on that condition, Workday would extract one instance for me. So what is my condition? I only want that position which is related to workers international assignment. So that would be my condition. So let's see if there is a condition already available. Is international assignment. Now if you see, so this is my condition. If not, I can still create a condition if I want to, right? And we'll see that as well with another example. So here we already have a workday delivered field or a workday delivered condition. So for each worker, system evaluates all positions, all the jobs that the worker is in, and then checks is for any given position, is this condition true? If this condition is true, then system would give me that instance, right? Now in theory, if you see, based on this condition, system may still return multiple instances. So let me give you an example, right? Let's say a worker can have many allowances assigned. Now I want a worker who has, let's say, a monthly allowance. So I want a worker's monthly allowance. Now, if you see, a worker may have many monthly allowances. So for example, I could be getting car allowance and I could be getting mobile allowance. So when I build a condition saying extract from all the allowances, only get me those allowances which are monthly. Now for a given worker, system would return two allowances, car and mobile, right? But then this is a single instance field that I'm building. So what system would do is it will randomly pick one of these because ultimately this is a single instance field and show it to me, right? Or another example, I want to see performance of the employee. Now a worker may have gone through 10 different performance reviews over the past 10 years he has been working. So which performance review do I need? The latest one, right? So whenever I'm building an extract single instance, I'll also have to sort it. If I don't sort it properly, system would randomly pick one and then give it to me, right? So in the case of performance review, the way I'll sort it is get me the performance review, which is the latest one. So I'll have to specify a sort field as well. In our case, there's no sorting required because I know, or at least we can see in the system, that every worker only has one international assignment. So it doesn't matter what sorting I select. So whenever a given value is not relevant, we simply select is true. So these are again workday delivered fields. I can select any one of these. And the reason I'm selecting this is because I know based on our condition, any which ways, only a single instance will be returned.
So here, if the employee has been on an international assignment twice
Mhm.
or maybe three times, then would
It
which
wouldn't
instance?
because this field, it only shows me the current additional jobs of the worker.
So it wouldn't give you the history of
Exactly, it
international.
wouldn't. So for that, I'll have to build it on a different object. I'll have to pull it on worker history, right? So let's
Okay.
say once again, I'm creating a calc field or let's go in here. Or let me take something easier. I'm coming here and I want to pull all organization assignments. So when I go in here, all right. So it shows me that this worker is on, I think this is the supervisory org. It shows me that this worker is on this cost center. And out of this, let's say I only want to sort the region he belongs to. right? Once again, I can create an ESI. So this field, once again, it only shows me the current organization assignments for the worker.
Okay. And in the international assignment calc field,
Mhm.
you're saying any is true. So which one would it pull? Like, would it pull the first one or the latest one?
Okay, so so the reason I'm selecting any is true is because in this case the sorting doesn't matter, right? And the reason
Mhm.
sorting doesn't matter is because I know this will only return me one instance. I would select, can you think of some relevant example wherein I can actually show you? Uh, just give me one moment. Mm, 1 second. Let me, I think for our case, uh, uh, let's see. I'm thinking. Okay, let's take this one. Staffing history approved, or let me go in here and now add staffing history approved, because this will pull me the entire staffing history of the worker. And now we can use the sort field. We'll first run this report. Okay, right. All right. If you see, it is basically pulling me the entire staffing history of the worker. So it shows hire, and then this worker was sent on international assignment. Similarly for this worker and this worker. Now let me go in here, and instead of all positions, I'm selecting staffing history approved. And I'm saying any is true here. Okay. Now basically what would happen is, this is a multi-instance field. When I do that, I have not written any condition, right? I have selected the default value, any is true. So for each of these workers, in their staffing history, they have two events. One is hire and the start international assignment. Now what would happen is, system would randomly return any of these instances. But now what I want is the latest staffing event for the worker. So now I can put a sort field saying the one with effective date, right? So when I go in here, if you see the date this business process takes effect. So I'm saying sort the values that are returned. I've not written any condition. I've basically said any is true. So when I say any is true, it is basically I'm saying return me everything. Similarly, when sort I say any is true, I'm basically saying don't sort whatever values Workday is returning. I'm just using that. So in this case, I'm not writing any condition, which means the entire staffing history of the worker is returned. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorting it in an effective based on their effective date. And now I want to sort them in their descending order, which means the one with the highest effective date comes first and then so on and so forth. So I'm sorting them in their descending order so that the one with the highest effective date is at the top and I want the first occurrence. So now when I copy this and don't worry about the field name. So for each of these workers, okay, let's see what is happening for this worker first. Job, worker history. Okay, so obviously their hire was on 1st of Jan 2020 and their international assignment is later 2022, which is fine. Let's see what is happening with this third worker. Why is that? So based on our calculation, we want that staffing event which has the highest effective date. That's what we are looking at, right? Okay, let's see what is happening with this worker. Why is that? Workday returned the hire date. All right, 3/8/2022, 3/8/2022. Okay, now if you see, because the hire date is exactly same as the international assignment date. Now Workday, because once again, so this is what happens, right? If you see, this is when based on your sorting or based on your condition, more than one values are true, then Workday randomly returns anything. So if you see for this worker, what is the effective date of their hire? 3/8/2022. Their effective date of international assignment is also 3/8/2022. Now Workday cannot make a decision. It randomly returns the hire,
Okay. If they are
right?
on the same date, right?
Exactly. So when you say if based on your condition or based on your sort field, if more than one instances are being returned, then because this is a single instance field, Workday would randomly pick one of those and give it to you.
And the same case is with the ESI, right? So if I'm
So this
pulling
is an ESI. ESI
Mhm.
means extract single
Single
instance,
instance, okay.
right? Because Workday can only extract one instance and based on your sort and based on my condition. So Workday first checks the condition. My condition is any is true. So system
Hmm.
has basically returned all three staffing events higher and then two international assignees. Then Workday goes through this sorting. Again, all three have the same effective date. So it's randomly returned me higher. But for the other two, because okay, Based on the conditions, system still returns higher and international assignees, but then their effective date is different. So here the higher date is, what is it, 1/1/2000, and international assignees is 2022. So now they are sorted in descending order based on the effective date, which means international assignment comes first, and I'm taking the very first instance. Make sense? So this is how ESI works. And the reason ESI works this way is because ESI is a single instance field. So
Yeah.
even if based on your condition, based on your filtering, based on your sorting, more than one instances are returned, it can ultimately show you more than, out of those multiple instances, it can only show you one random instance. Okay, so that is an ESI. Now EMI is exactly similar, right? In fact, EMI is easier.
So,
So I,
sir, 1 minute. I just wanted to ask. So, when first we were using organization assignment
Mhm,
as a business object, right, to extract the single instance
mhm.
for the so in that would also give the same value, right? So,
Same value. The reason
okay, okay,
but organization assignment fields doesn't store history. So organization assignments only shows my current organization assignments. So basically system checks what value is in the field on your source field, and based on that it will return you value. So had I used effective date on organization assignments or on the position field, it wasn't of any use, because let's say when I joined in 2000 I was a consultant, and then I became a manager, and then I became a senior manager, and today I'm a vice president, and then I'm also on an international assignment. It will not store my history. My positions field will only store my current positions, right? And that's why I use this one, because here I could have demonstrated how the sorting works.
so the staffing events can be of different types, right? So, how does it pick only the international assignment based on the effective date? So, you're saying the correct
Exactly.
latest staffing event, it will
Yes,
show, right?
exactly. So staffing history, this shows staffing events for the worker: hire, termination, change job, international assignments. These are all staffing events. There can be other events as well. For example, this worker went on leave, but that is not a staffing event. So it only shows me the staffing events.
But if I want to pull only international assignments, so how is it working? I'm not able to understand
So
that.
So
condition you have to add like a true
exactly.
or false.
So instead of any is true, I need to simply change the condition. So I'll come here, I'll edit, right? So I only want international assignments. Then I'll put a relevant condition here. Similarly, out of my positions, I only want international assignment positions. So I'll now create a ESI on this field, not on staffing history. Right? So you have to select the relevant source field, because ultimately all data is in source field. From
Mhm.
that source field, you are selecting a single instance. So if you want international assignment positions, you'll have to select the source field as this one. Make sense? So it is the
Okay,
field,
okay.
because if you're not selecting the right field, your ESI will not give you the right data, right? So if you want international assignment positions, this is what you'll have to do. So
Right. So
once
in
again,
staffing history approved, it is just giving you based on the effective date, the latest staffing
exactly.
event.
Staffing
Okay.
history. Yes,
History. Okay.
exactly.
And if we want only international assignment, we have
Then
to.
I'll again do the same thing. I'll again create a single instance, right? CF, I'll just call it test. I'll come in here. This time I'll select the field all positions or jobs. I'll only need those positions. So here I'll select the relevant condition. So it's the condition that matters. So you'll have to decide whether condition is required, whether sort. Now here, if you see, sorting doesn't is not relevant for me. So that's why I'm selecting N is true. And I'm saying okay, right? So here, basically what I've said, out of all the positions, only get me that position wherein this condition is true. And what is this condition? This condition is basically checking is, So if you see, this is a workday delivered condition. So this is a field of type boolean. So boolean either returns true or false. So if this position, if you see, it returns true if a position is an international assignment. So this is a condition. It's a workday delivered condition. And similar to any condition, a condition only either returns true or it returns false. So if a given position is international assignment position, it will return true. If it is true, then that position will be included in this. So now,
So it will return history data as well because there's
no, it
no.
wouldn't, because I'm not, see again, it returns whatever source field I have selected. So what is
Okay.
there in my source field?
Mhm.
Positions and
So
jobs.
to know what is there in my source field, you'll have to
Mhm.
go to the source field and look at the description. So this field, it contains all positions or jobs for a given worker. So because this field contains positions or jobs for a worker, right? Out of that, it will only return me that position or job which satisfies this condition. If you want history, then you'll have to go to the relevant source field.
Field.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
So
Got it.
Workday has
So,
hundreds and thousands, billions of
So in this
fields.
all positions and jobs, it will only show the positions and jobs that the person is currently in, right? Right.
Exactly. It
So
doesn't
that's
show the history.
hmm,
Right? And why is that the case? Because that's how Workday has built this field.
build
These
this
are
field.
all Workday delivered fields. We are simply leveraging them. That's all we are doing. Right? So now when I copy it, all right, and run it, right? And then go in here. You see, it's only giving me international assignment positions. So out of this source field, it's now getting me only those values which match the condition. What is my condition? Is this position an international assignment position? Yes, it is true for these three positions. Okay. So you'll have to decide what source field you have to select. Right. Now EMI is exactly similar. In fact, it's easier because you don't have to do sorting or any of those things, right? EMI means you are extracting multiple instances, right?
I just have one question.
Mhm.
So, how do I find all the fields which has history? Uh, so, for
There's
example, you said
no
all
direct way.
position history will fetch out all the history regarding position, and
So
then
there's no way. The only thing is probably I don't, let's say I'm building my calculation for the first time. I don't know. I'll
Mhm.
probably search for history, right? There's no shortcut in Workday. Either you know, the reason I know this field is there and I was searching for that because I have already used it in my reporting,
Exactly, yeah.
right? So either you have seen it in some report or basically this is what you'll have to do. So now, okay, I think this is relevant. I'll go in here, look at the description. Oh no, this is not relevant for me. I don't even know what it is, right? So then I'll see, okay, this doesn't looks relevant. Oh, this is not relevant. Oh, this looks somewhat relevant, right? So this is what I'll have to do. There's no other option, right?
Okay. But do you know which fields are the most used? Because I know for business process history, it's the action event. For
Yeah.
staffing, you said that position history is the one which
So
is used.
action event is the business object on which a lot of these. So action event is not a field. Uh,
But actually, it helps to fetch out the history of business process. That's
exactly. It's similar to worker, right? If see
yeah.
worker is a field as well as a business object, right?
Yeah.
So
So, would you be able to like give us like the most used
uh,
fields or business objects which would fetch out the history?
okay, I can certainly have a look. I can do that. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Now extract multi-instance is exactly similar, right? The only, as I mentioned, uh, company, and so out of all org assignments, if you remember, we were looking at all the organizations for the worker. Now let's say out of all org assignments, I only want company and cost center, right? So now my source field is, if you see the difference, you only have to specify the source field and the condition, right? The reason sort field is not required is because this is a multi-instance field, right? Here you can pull multiple instances. Here, because you can only select one field, so Workday gives you an option to sort and then specify what instance you want to select. Okay, so now I'm going to organization assignments. When I go there, system automatically populates the relevant business object. Now I want to build a condition, right? So in our first case, we took conditions which were either already there or uh, which or we simply selected any is true, right? Now let's say I want to build a condition. In that case, I'll have to build a condition on the related business object. So whenever we build a condition, if we have to build that, we need to build it on the related business object. So what is the related business object in this calc field I'm building? It is organization, right? In fact, if I come in here and click on create calculated field, right? I'll have to build it on organization. And I'm saying, so what is a condition? As I mentioned, it either returns true or false. And we looked at some Workday delivered conditions as well, right? So for example, this condition, it always returns true. This is also Boolean, it always returns true, right? So if we want to build our own conditions, then the function is true or false. That's the function we use. TF, I'm saying organization, and I'm saying company or cost center. So now I only need those organizations whose organization type, right, is either company or cost center, right? So once again, a worker may have many organization assignments. For each org assignment, so for example, I may belong to GMS company, I may belong to office of CEO cost center, I may belong to some IT help desk supervisory org, I may belong to some custom org. Each org assignment system would check and see, is that org assignment related to a company or cost center, because that's the condition I've written. If it is true, system will only return that, right? So I have created a custom condition for myself. Once again, whenever I'm creating a condition, I'll have to do it on the related business object, not on the primary business object. So let's go in here and add to I'm adding my calc field, but just for so that we can visualize, I'm also adding the main field, right? So that we can actually see what was there in org assignments and what does this calc field return. I'll also remove that filter because it's only getting me. I'll go back and say first person is not blank, right? I'm not sure if that was the right filter we selected. Hmm, okay, it's blank because we don't want a person who was purged, right? We want a person who was not purged. I'll say person purged is blank. All right. Mm, okay, so if you see, it's this worker has all these org assignments, including some custom orgs, but then it's only returning me cost center and company, right? So here it's giving me multi-instance. So multi-instance field can return you 0 instances or 1 instance or many instances, right? Worker may not have, if you see this worker doesn't have any org assignments at all, and that's why my multi-instance field also doesn't return anything. So multi-instances can be 0 or 1 or more than 1, but a single instance will either be 0 or 1, right? So multi-instance, I just have to specify the condition. In single instance, I'll also have to specify the sort order or the value based on which it has to be sorted, and the sort order as well. All right. So that was extract single instance and extract multi-instance.